it's a day that, you know, we have to, as America is going into an unusual sort of time, and, you know, Afghanistan has been recaptured. It feels like 20 years passed and nothing has, we have come back to the status quo. Nothing has changed. But as Hindu Americans, we are here today to commemorate the fallen, those who died, the soldiers. They were soldiers who climbed up the towers knowing that they were going to die and not come back. You know, so that is who we remember, you know, the first responders, the firemen, the policemen who bravely gave up their life, the people, the passengers, about 3,000 of all who died. So today we have Anjalee Swamiji, and we have Swamy Maheshananda to offer Shraddhanjali to the victims and to commemorate this solemn occasion. I invite you, Swamy Maheshananda and Anjalee ji, to please take over and offer your prayers and Shraddhanjali. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Namaskar, everyone, and pranams to our global Hindu Sangha. It is with great pleasure that I join this great family of this very special tradition, this eternal tradition, to offer prayers and invoke the energies of the Devatas, the Gurus, and all of the great sampradayas of our tradition. And we offer these prayers with great compassion, with great love, and appreciation for life, an appreciation for loving God in all forms, in any way that we choose to love. On this next day, after the auspicious Ganesh Chaturthi, we'll begin with a mantra to Ganapati. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Sarva Vigna Vinashaya Sarva Kalyana Hetave Parvati Priya Putraya Shri Ganeshaya Namo Namaha. Shri Ganeshaya Namo Namaha. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Mudhyachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashistate. So now I'd like to offer prayer for universal welfare, universal Vedic peace chant. Sarvesham swastir bhavatu, sarvesham shantir bhavatu, sarvesham purnam bhavatu, sarvesham mangalam bhavatu, sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu nirmaya, sarve vadrani pashyantu, ma kashid dukh bhag bhave. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. And lastly, I'd like to offer our pranams to Mother Nature and to all our children, the youth in this world, the youth in all of the universities throughout the world that are being influenced by many great teachers, but also with respects to the reason this conference exists, many youth, sadly, that are being influenced by a very false narrative that is existing throughout major universities in this country. I was a student at a university in this country. I was graduated from the University of Florida. And I remember in the 1980s, not knowing very much about Hindu Dharma, except a few, perhaps Hindu neighbors in my neighborhood in Miami. And my initial introduction on campus was seeing the Hare Krishnas, ISKCON, serving food to the students on our campus. And I questioned it. I didn't know what it was. And I would hear criticism, and I would hear judgment from those that also didn't understand what they were doing. And that impression never left me, this idea that I could eat food and not have to pay for it. It was for free. It was offered to me as darshan every time I walked to class. And subsequently, many years later, I was invited to the ISKCON temple in Chowpatty in Mumbai. And I understood their Sangha, their unique way of loving Krishna. Because being raised as a Christian boy, as a Catholic boy, I was taught that Jesus was everything, and that Jesus looked a certain way, and that this religion is the best religion. And I questioned that. And I asked questions to my university teachers. I asked questions to my parents. Nobody could answer my questions the way that I wanted to understand. And as I continued my search, I began to read and explore different teachings, and I came across, by no coincidence, the teachings of Swamy Vivekananda, of Swami Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, And I began to understand the beauty of Hindu Dharma. And most importantly is the opportunity that I was given to love God, to see God in the way that I wanted to see him or her. And that changed everything for me. And I realized that yoga, hatha yoga, which you see everywhere in this country, is a Hindu practice. I realized that meditation, however you sit to close your eyes, comes from Vedic Hindu Dharma. I realized that as I became vegetarian, that was also born in the land of the Vedas, in the land of India, until obviously oppression came to India via Islam and colonialism of the Brits. And obviously that's changed that. And I try to explain that to the many groups that I bring to India for the last 20 years. I'm a sadhak, I'm a yogi, I practice Ayurveda, I've studied Jyotish for 25 years. And I realized the profound impact that this tradition is offering to the world, to heal the world. India will heal the world. Realize that. And the message that Vivekananda brought over 100 years ago, and the message that Swamy Ram Tirth brought to America and Yogananda Ji brought to America is the bridging of East and West for one reason, because America needs India. India will heal America. And it is these dharmas, Sanatana Dharma, that eternal tradition or Hinduism, that will help us to all heal and help us to understand that individuality is the most important thing that we all have, to recognize that God, that Brahman exists in all living things, that God can be adored and loved in nature. And most importantly, which we do not see in the Abrahamic traditions, is that God can be respected and adored as the feminine divine. It's sad to see that our country leads the world in the destruction and the killing of animals. And this continues today. But also, vegetarianism is spreading throughout this country. I have traveled from East and West, teaching yoga, Ayurveda, Jyotish, and explaining to people that this is not just fitness, that this is not just fixing the body. This is about spiritual evolution. This is about recognizing that what we do, what each of us does, is connected to the law of reciprocity. If we change as an individual, our community changes. And this work is individual, it's singular, but it's also plural. It affects the whole. And I see this sad situation that we're dealing with in this country, with the oppression and the phobic narrative that persists, and it has persisted for some time because I witnessed it growing up here in this country. I look at it as an opportunity for transformation, and I pray deeply with great gratitude to be part of this tradition, that we use this to grow in our love. Fear perpetuates our society today. Fear perpetuates the minds of much of the youth. The media and academia play a huge part in this. And what I find is the most important is family. And it is the most important aspect of this tradition is not only our group, our families, our mother, father, children, but also our global Hindu family. We're here together to help each other and to support not only Hinduism, but that the better good of all human beings. That is what is in the essence of this prayer. Sarvae bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya. May all be free of troubles. May all beings be happy. And this is the prayer that we have for those beings. Keep in mind that karma and the law of rebirth teaches us that at some point in our history of embodiment, we were also low in our consciousness. We also did negative things. We also maybe had fearful thoughts. But fortunately, through good actions, we transformed. And now, since we have a tradition that allows us to grow and to apply very advanced teachings, very advanced principles of ahimsa, of satya, of aparigraha, and all of these great Vedantic truths, it helps us to help those that live in fear. It doesn't justify what they're doing. It doesn't justify what they're teaching, but good and the teaching of this wisdom and sharing this wisdom, if we can continue to share this wisdom. And I'll say lastly, as I was taught, that we have to teach people and these individuals that are looking for answers for the real truth, is that we have to honor our lineages, the sampradayas that have carried this teaching, this dissemination of this teaching for thousands of years, beyond Ram and Krishna, and there the teaching is pure. We have to rely on their interpretations of the scriptures because they carry the Shakti, they carry the Samadhi, the pure consciousness. And that interpretation of the scripture is correct. It is in alignment. It doesn't have contrast or contradiction. What all lineages appreciate each other. We see that in India. Sadly, in America, the yoga schools here argue with each other. They don't agree with each other. This is the name of this posture. No, this is the way I was taught. And the very problem that they have is that they never learned yoga from the lineage, from the guru traditions, from the sages. And these lines are unbroken today. And I am so fortunate that I can at least have my humble opportunity to teach a few people the way of the Vedas, the way of Sanatana Dharma, and allow each and every human being to love God and to see the divine in the way that they choose to do it. Namaskar and pranams, and now Anjalee Swamy will offer this beautiful hymn to the Devi. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Maheshananda. Namaskar, everyone. I'm Anjalee, and as Maheshananda said, that Sanatan Dharma teaches love, compassion towards all beings, because the Brahman exists in everyone. So today, as a tribute to the victims of 9/11, I am invoking the presence of the Divine Feminine, Divine Mother, the Devi, the Shakti. And I invoke her, I beseech her to bless us all and to energize each one of us with her immense energy, to ease the painful hearts with her unconditional love, her compassion, and above all, fill this planet with the aura of peace and annihilate all evil and negative energies from this world. So I offer this DeviStuti. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shaktirupena Sanstita Namastasye 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 Namo Namah Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Dayarupena Sanstita Namastasye 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 Namo Namah Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shantirupena Sanstita Namastasye 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 Namo Namah Jaganamahe Jagajanani Jaganamahe Jagajanani Jai Jagadambe Devi Bhavani Jai Jagadambe Devi Bhavani Devi Saraswati Durga Lakshmi Devi Saraswati Durga Lakshmi Maheshasura Samharini Mata Maheshasura Samharini Mata Jaganamahe Jagajanani Jagajanani Om Shanti.
Thank you, Anjali ji. That was very beautiful. Thank you, Maheshananda ji, for your very, very wise words. It really encompasses and encapsulates everything that Dharma stands for. And as you said, this is what the Hindu Dharma, Sanatan Dharma brings to the world. And, we cannot though forget what 9/11 means to the world. To the United States, it will always mean the attack that happened on its soil. And again, in Afghanistan, when the government, was toppled over and Taliban has taken over, it looks like we are back into the medieval and dark ages. I want to introduce Mr. Sushil Panditji. Everyone here knows him. We know Kashmir, we know Jammu and Kashmir and what Jammu and Kashmir went through. And, before 9/11 happened, the footsteps of, the terrorism from Afghanistan used to come and knock its door on India, in the form of the hijacking of the plane in Nepal. I cannot forget that. I cannot forget what happened in Kashmir, and how the terrorists used to train in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and come into at the borders and enter Jammu and Kashmir and make it an unstable place. Mr. Sushil Pandit is a world-renowned activist, and he is a prominent Kashmiri leader. And above all, he's an intellectual. He has guided us through his lectures. I have followed him, and been inspired by him. His talks have always, emphasized the need to confront issues that face us, whether in Kashmir, whether in India, or whether from a global perspective. Without further ado, I welcome Mr. Sushil Panditji. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I ask you to offer us your words of wisdom. Thank you. Pronounce. You're on mute, Panditji.
Namaskar, everyone. Namaskar, Swamy Maheshananda ji, Richa ji, Anjalee ji, and all of you who have joined today for this event. Thank you, the organizers, and thank you all those who worked tirelessly for putting it together. And thank you, Gayatri ji, for contacting me and inviting me over. I join all of you in paying my homage to those who departed this day in those brutal attacks on the Twin Tower. And some of them innocent, defenseless, caught in this hate, and many of those who risked their lives trying to save them and perished in the process. I witnessed it on television live. When the first plane crashed through, I remember I was in a meeting and somebody immediately rushed into the room and said a plane has crashed through one of the towers of Twin Tower, and we all rushed to the TV set and we were speculating whether this was an accident. If this was a plane that went out of control and was trying to perhaps land in the river nearby. But then when second plane crashed, I had absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was by design. And when I said so, most around me disbelieved and didn't want to buy that. Even I was amazed at what I thought, because even I barely believed it. It was more of a speculation than conviction. Because nobody could have thought this manner of invasion of the mightiest country in the world. And then we all know what happened. All that is recent history, painful history, but a reminder of the times we are living in and the challenges we face. But I would like to take this opportunity to go back not just 20 years, but 128 years. For it was this day in 1893, this very precise day, when Swamy Vivekananda in the World Parliament of Religions delivered that stirring speech and introduced the word Hindu to the popular lexicon in the US. It will not be an exaggeration to say he was the first Hindu icon who introduced our tradition to the world in the manner he did. And it was he who asked us to be proud of this identity. The first man to proclaim it, that he was a Hindu, and a proud Hindu at that. If I were to call it our 9/11, our gift to US, and contrast it with the 9/11 that another mindset, another worldview delivered to US about 20 years ago, you'll see the contrast. And it is in this contrast lies the irony that today we are having to come together and contest, question, indeed oppose an initiative taken by some faceless, nameless entities who were hiding behind a list of universities and putting together an event, a call to dismantle global Hindutva. It is indeed ironical, many times over perhaps, that today is the 128th anniversary of Swamy Vivekananda's stirring eloquence at Chicago. It is the 20th anniversary of shocking events at the Twin Towers. And we are living through the horrid images we see emerging from Afghanistan, where the world seems to have turned its back on 35 million people, an entire country put on a platter and gifted, literally, to those who the world ought to be fighting. Dismantling the word applied there more appropriately than anywhere else. But instead of dismantling this pernicious worldview, ideology, they were negotiating with them at Doha. They did not lose a war against them. They did not lose any battle against them. They did not lose Afghanistan fighting in Kandahar or in Mazar-e-Sharif or in Herat or in Jalalabad or for that matter in Kabul. No. They lost to them in Doha, across the table. They didn't lose despite their technology, despite their numbers, despite their resources, despite their might. They lost because of a weakness here, because of the lack of will to stay put and do what was meant to be done. Sometimes I feel we are far too close to these events to clearly see what is happening around us. Very often a bit of distance, both in time and space, gives you a much clearer view to understand what is happening. How a mighty nation, an incredibly powerful force with huge technological superiority, massive resources at their command, simply capitulated without a fight. The enormity of this spectacle probably will dawn on us as the consequences of this failure present us, as they already are. I don't know how many of us appreciate that there is no global order today, as there are no guarantors of anything called a global order. It is not just the US that offered an entire country on a platter to a bunch of medieval barbarians who've learned nothing in the last 20 years. In fact, who've gone from bad to worse if their conduct is anything to go by. It also tells us that it's not just the US, it's the mighty NATO, which was on the run from Afghanistan, begging for a few more days to evacuate and being told, no, you don't have even a single minute extra. And they turned their tail and left. It wasn't just the NATO, it was the entire EU, European Union. A significant number of mighty European countries are indeed part of NATO. But EU in itself, in its own right, is a large entity. And when our parliament did what was best in our best interest on August 5, 2019, by reviewing our constitution and amending it and expunging some of the most pernicious provisions from it, it was the EU that objected from Brussels. It was the EU that made some negative comments and observations in order to tell us that kindly be more democratic, be more humane, be more inclusive. I'm wondering, where is that EU today that had these gratuitous words for us? Where are they hiding? When an entire nation wants to flee, but don't have the wherewithal, they clutch the wheels of the aircraft about to take off and fall off the skies. Did you ever imagine that you would be witness to such horrific images? As if 9/11 in 2001 wasn't horrific enough. The anticlimax to all the effort since a few days back is even more horrific. But what beats all of this is a global conference that seeks to dismantle Vivekananda's Hindutva, who had to wait for several minutes after his opening phrase of brothers and sisters of America because the clapping wouldn't stop. We are perhaps living in ironical times, and it is par for the course. that today we have to deal with a bunch of self-righteous, sanctimonious renegades who, despite all this happening around them, choose us as their targets for villainy, for taking our reputation apart, for pointing an accusing finger at us, putting us in the dock. For what? Actually, it's not difficult to understand. For 1,000 years, if you look back, ladies and gentlemen, what we call the Hindu civilization is in retreat. Our borders have been shrinking. Hindus, for the last 1,000 years, have been fleeing from their lands, have been made to leave their homes and hearts for safer places, have been suffering genocide, plunder, destitution, and subjugation. It's not loss of territory that I am bemoaning. That, of course, because I don't think territorial expansionism was ever the mind that our civilization brought to the world. Territory for us was sacred. It was our habitat. It was something that nurtured us like mother. It was our environment. It was a civilization that we built on that territory. It was a culture that we evolved. It was our legacy. It was our inheritance. It was the hard work and great knowledge traditions that our ancestors engendered. That was the territory. And getting uprooted from our moorings was loss of home, was loss of identity, was hemorrhaging of an entire civilization. That is what we have been mourning. And all that in the face of not any phobia. I somehow don't like the word Hindu phobia or the phrase Hindu phobia. Phobia, as I understand the word, is irrational fear of something. Nobody fears Hindus in this world, rationally or irrationally. There are people who fear certain other ideologies and traditions or religions. But Hindus don't belong in that list. What we face is some kind of intolerance. Like some people have lactose intolerance or gluten intolerance. Some in this world have Hindu intolerance. Some are allergic to us, so maybe it's Hindu allergy. Some harbor hate towards us. So call it what you may. Hate, allergy, intolerance, jealousy, greed, or a sum total of all this. But that's what we faced. And because we had evolved a certain value system which was not in sync with the barbarians we were face to face with, even a doctrine of war here was more civilized than some of the most civilized aspects of the adversaries we faced. Two, we did not see enemies in this world. The invocations Maheshananda ji was starting this program with, Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, is a prayer for global well-being. Whereas in some of our adversaries, when they pray to their Lord Almighty, they pray for our destruction. In as many words. In some of the so-called divine texts, you have to read to believe how much of hatred and anger there is for a tradition like ours. It's a chalk and cheese contrast. In our belief system, in our worldview, in the values we inculcate and propagate, we pray for the entire universe. In our Shanti Mantra, we invoke every part of the nature, society, divine creation. That's our worldview. Perhaps our ancestors couldn't for their life believe that an enemy could be as vicious, as vile, as unreasonable. Because even in Devasur Sangram, in our lore, in our history, the Asur also had something good about him. First of all, the Asuras were the progeny of Diti, one of the two wives of Rishi Kashyapa. So they were also Rishi Putras. An Asur like Ravana was a great intellectual. Most of the Asurs had their Shaktis after doing a lot of tapasya. So even our enemies were not without merit. But here we were face to face with civilizations. I mean, I wonder why we call it civilizations. I'm forced to because Samuel P. Huntington called it Clash of Civilizations. The question should be, where is the civilization in this clash? Yes, we have an enemy, but it's hardly a civilization. And when in this day and age, you see them conducting themselves in the manner they do, in the streets of Kabul, in the cities of neighboring Iran, in not so distant Saudi Arabia. You know, as we talk, the Air Force of Saudi Arabia is routinely bombing civilian areas of Yemen, day in and day out. They do not have recourse to air defense with guns and ammunitions. No. They just have to soak in carpet bombing. And why? In that peninsula, in Arabian Peninsula, there is no other religion except Islam. But within Islam, one sect has declared the other one kafir, a non-believer, an infidel. And that's enough to annihilate. Not by ones and twos or hundreds and 200s, by thousands and hundreds of thousands. Lay a siege and drive them to famine. Deprive young children and patients in the hospital of life-saving drugs. You have to see the footage emerging from Yemen to realize what's being done. But not by any other tradition, by their own tradition, in the neighborhood, in the holy Arabian Peninsula, where the Prophet walked and preached. And in our neighborhood, from where they evicted us, started evicting us 1,000 years ago. And about 22 years ago, they wouldn't even tolerate the stone images of Buddha, which were in any case in ruins, which were probably the only evidence left that in this land, there was a time when Buddhism thrived. Imagine the level of intolerance. Because they couldn't do it with bare hands, they deployed cannons to blow those stone images to smithereens. They were UNESCO's heritage sites, and the world couldn't do anything except watching it in horror. And today, the man who did this is the Prime Minister of New Afghanistan. In the face of the mightiest country in the world that governed it for 20 years, mightiest military alliance of the world led by the same country, groupings like EU and G7, the mighty United Nations Security Council, of which India happens to be the chairman. I mean, you're looking for ironies, you'll be spoiled for choice. What we are seeing today. And in the midst of all this, what we see is an attempt to dismantle global Hindutva. I mean, it's a joke. And it would be funny if it were not dangerous and venomous and hateful as it is. What it seeks to do is to put us on a back foot, make us defensive, make us apologetic for our identity, make us wonder, where did we go wrong? Do the victim blaming. And at the same time, whitewash their own sins, whitewash their own blunders, put a lid on their own ferment, ideological, political, cultural, all kinds of ferment. We're not surprised that some of those names are very Hindu sounding. And they claim to be from our milieu. We shouldn't be surprised. Because they are the ones who forced us as a polity and as those who have come to usurp all vantage positions in the establishment post-independence, invented lies, distorted history, distorted facts, built false narratives in order to further push us back, further weaken us. Today, as we try and stand up on our 2 feet, we are being resented. And they're not used to being questioned. They're not used to hearing arguments against their pet peeves. They're not used to a rebuttal, reasoned, factual rebuttal. Thanks to the social media and thanks to the democratization of the spaces where people can interact and raise a parallel discourse, we are able to today put together a cogent argument and force the world to hear it. Till 10 years ago, this wasn't possible. So we didn't even exist. We didn't have a voice. We didn't have the space. We didn't decide what the headlines in the newspapers would be. We didn't decide what kind of news would be published. We didn't decide what kind of editorials would be written. Because as I mentioned, they had come to usurp and monopolize such positions in the academia, in the media, in the bureaucracy, in the socio-political spaces. They set the agendas. They distorted history. They distorted our textbooks. Our first education minister in the independent India didn't ever go to any school. His name was Maulana Azad. He was part of the Khilafat committee, which wanted to restore the caliph in Turkey when it was dismantled by the British after the First World War. This man became the first education minister, and we had a series of similar such minds, including Nurul Hasan, Humayun Kabir, MC Chagla, and the likes, who with a vicious relentlessness created the curriculum and the textbooks that fed generations of independent Indians lies and distortions that the best of our talent thought it was waste of time to be in this country and try their luck elsewhere. And indeed, the polity and the system in this country wouldn't value them either. Our education, our policy establishment was a hostage to this mindset. And indeed, our media, the great pontificators from the ivory towers, would hand down to us the most humiliating, self-flagellating points of view to make us feel weaker and apologetic about our identity and history. They would deprive us of even knowledge about our ancestors. I must share with you here, a few years back, I had an opportunity to go to Oxford and meet the director of a school, which was a school for Hindu studies in Oxford. And I took that opportunity to tell him that not a single university in India has a program called Hindu studies. such is the kind of academic environment we gave ourselves under the leadership of left liberal secular cabal that ruled India and had come to usurp some of the most vantage positions. They today feel loss of those privileges, and it pinches them. They had a free run for decades in India. And in that reign, nobody dared question, because when we did, in our time during the universities, a kind of academic repression was let loose. You had to see how academics who held a different point of view were victimized, were harassed, their careers ruined, even before they started. They were made to pay a huge price for disagreeing. And these people call themselves liberals. I studied in JNU in the early 80s. And I have several such names. And before that, before my generation, in Kashmir, just because we were Hindus, we were deprived of our just opportunities. The merit holders were deprived admissions into post-graduation. Forget jobs. Several of my father's generation were forced to leave Kashmir to pursue higher studies and to look for jobs and careers. But all of this was par for the course. Such discrimination, such harassment was legitimized. We, for the lack of space and time in the wider public discourse, were unheard. And the kind of times we were living in, the world was so divided in the Cold War blocs that Hindu plight was simply out of sight. The champions of human rights and democracy actually permitted a Hindu genocide in Bangladesh in 1971. Blood telegram sent by the Consul General of America in Dhaka. His name was Arthur Blood. I'm not punning on his second family name, but it indeed was a blood telegram. And the entire consulate staff was sacked by Henry Kissinger, the then Secretary of State, because it wasn't in line with their global political experience. The same US that flew from the bases in Italy to bomb Yugoslavia in '99 for ethnic cleansing, rewarded these generals who committed worse war crimes in Bangladesh with citizenship in US, with green cards to their kith and kin. So today we need to raise our voice and be heard even more, because what you see happening today, aided and abetted by certain well-known, very well-known universities in US, is the vindication of what we are doing for the last few years. Because it is beginning to hurt, because we are beginning to be heard and make an impact, because it is no longer possible to browbeat us, to push us under the carpet, that they are using a sledgehammer like this. It is in fact a tribute to global Hindutva argument that they had to put together so many universities, so much of resource, and so much of propaganda to put us down. You must take heart from the fact that we are increasingly becoming more and more effective, more and more powerful, more and more resilient in our defiance, that they have to resort to such cowardice. I don't see any prominent name coming up and owning up this. I don't know what their reason is to hide behind. But make no mistake, these are very powerful interests globally who've aligned together to put us down. They know India is on resurgence. India is no longer receding. Is no longer a shrinking violet. Is seeking its rightful place as an equal in this world. And today is gathering the wherewithal to assert itself and be a voice of reason. Has never been hanging by the coattails of the powerful and the rich, and will never be with increasing economic clout, political clout, and ability to defend itself against the rogues. So I am very hopeful of the future. I believe as a nation, as a civilization, we've turned the bend. It's been a long, dark journey of 1,000 years, but we are now seeing better times ahead. It is time to confidently assert and rebut all such machinations that our enemies will deploy. There'll be more of this in the times to come. Don't be surprised, because as we get stronger, as we assert ourselves, as we speak louder, they will keep attempting these sinister measures in order to put us down. We better anticipate them and be prepared for them. I wish all of you luck. And I again thank you with all the humility at my command for giving me this privilege and opportunity to interact with you and to share my views on 9/11 today. Thank you, all of you. Again, if you have any questions and they aren't too difficult, I'll try and answer.
Thank you so much, Sushilji. You just kicked off the conference in a really, really comprehensive manner and addressed all of the pain points and all of the points that we are really looking to address through our panels today. And we have a really great lineup to talk about all of the facts that you mentioned, the decoloniality, you know, that colonization, which even Maheshananda ji mentioned, is the reason that we've always been, you know, he talked about the fact that in the United States, he always felt how Hinduism was, you know, or Dharma was talked in a different way. But we felt the same thing in India, because like you said, the narrative was completely from the left and from, you know, from those sort of sources. And today we are working towards decolonizing, whether it's the education policy in the country in India. And even here, the cancel culture is so strong. We really need to figure out ways, and today's panels, which are really going to run for a long day today and tomorrow, but they will address all of our issues and give us ideas of how to use the dharmic lens to look at our world. Thank you, Sushilji, so much. And I will, you know, hopefully we'll be in touch with you for more such sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your inspiration. Namaste. And I would like to hand over now to Shri Rishikesh Shinoy. Rishikesh ji is a close friend of mine. We work together on the causes and many issues.